My brother's wife threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash. Store-bought garbage, she sneered. My kids only eat organic. My mom laughed. She has standards. I picked up the cake, smiled, and left. That night, I canceled the $2,100 monthly transfer to my brother's business account, which was really just his rent. His landlord called him 6 days later. My brother called me. "You're making us homeless," I said. "My name is Benedict. I'm 37 years old and I work as a forensic mortuary technician at the city morgue. I prepare bodies for autopsy, document conditions, maintain chain of custody on remains. When people find out what I do for a living, they either go very quiet or they immediately ask if I've ever seen anything scary. The answer to the second question is yes, but not in the way they mean. The scariest thing I ever witnessed happened at a child's birthday party in a suburban kitchen on a Saturday afternoon in broad daylight. It involved a chocolate cake, a woman with very strong opinions about organic produce, and my own mother laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. But let me back up. Let me give you the full picture first, because without the context, it just sounds like a bad day. And it was so much more than a bad day. It was the last day of a very long era. I grew up in Millhaven, one of those mid-sized towns that can't decide what it is. Not quite rural, not quite suburban. A place with 2 traffic lights and 6 churches and a Walmart that everyone complained about but everyone used. We lived on Creekside Drive, which sounds nicer than it was. The creek flooded every spring and the yard smelled like mud until June. My parents, Walt and Lorraine, had 3 kids. My older brother, Colton, me, and my younger sister, Paige. Every family has a logic to it, a kind of invisible org chart, and ours was very clear once you knew how to read it. Colton was the star. Paige was the baby. I was the one who remembered where everything was kept and made sure the bills got paid on time once I was old enough to understand what bills were. Colton was charismatic in the way that certain people are, effortlessly, almost accidentally. He played football through sophomore year until his knee went, and even after the knee, people still talked about him like he was about to go pro any day now. My father communicated primarily through grunts and sports commentary, so his 3-sentence speech at Colton's 21st birthday dinner was basically the Gettysburg Address by our household standards. I remember sitting at that table watching my dad put his hand on Colton's shoulder and thinking, I have never once seen that hand on my shoulder. Not once. I was 23 at the time. I had just passed my certification exams. Nobody mentioned it at dinner. Paige was the youngest, and therefore the most protected. The protection extended past childhood into a kind of permanent sheltering that meant she never really had to manage anything hard. When she crashed the car at 19, my mom cried and said, "She's just so sensitive." When I got a speeding ticket at 22, my mom said, "You should know better." The logic was never explained. It was just the weather. The 5 specific examples I always come back to, the ones I've turned over like smooth stones in my pocket for years. My 14th birthday, Colton's football team had a scrimmage. We went to the scrimmage. My birthday dinner was McDonald's on the way home, eaten in the car. Colton's 16th birthday involved a surprise party with 40 people and a DJ. When I got into the mortuary science program, my mother said, "Well, it's steady work, I suppose." When Colton announced he was starting a landscaping business, she bought him a banner that said, "Future Entrepreneur," and hung it in the kitchen for 4 months. I drove 2 hours to help my parents move furniture into a new apartment in 2019. My mom called to thank Colton for sending Benedict to help. He had sent nothing. He had suggested, via text, that I go. When I published a short piece in a regional forensic science journal, a case study, nothing major, but something I was proud of, my dad said, "Is that like a magazine?" My mom said, "Will they pay you?" They did not. She lost interest. Colton forgot my daughter Sophia's first birthday entirely. My mom said, "He's so busy with the business." Sophia turned 1 in April. The business had its slow season in April. I know because I'd been helping fund it since March. None of these things, taken individually, would hold up in court. That's the thing about this kind of family. The evidence is always too small to prosecute. You'd sound insane bringing it up. Your Honor, the defendant attended a football scrimmage on my 14th birthday. It sounds like nothing. It accumulates into everything. I left Millhaven at 22 and moved to the city for the mortuary program. Finished the certification, got hired at the county facility, worked my way up to senior technician over 8 years. I have my own caseload now, responsible for a specific set of remains from intake through release. It requires precision and a certain steadiness. You have to hold your professional self separate from your emotional self, because the work is intimate in ways most people don't anticipate. I'm good at it. My supervisor Greer told me once that I had the quietest hands she'd ever seen in intake. I still think about that. My apartment is on the 4th floor of a building with a broken elevator about 40% of the time. I have a 7-year-old daughter named Sophia who lives with me full-time. My apartment has one detail that tells you everything about me. I have a full wall of bookshelves, and on the bottom shelf, at Sophia's height, I keep her books facing outward so she can see the covers. Every month, we rotate them based on what she's currently obsessed with. Right now, it's books about ocean animals and a series about a girl detective who solves crimes using math. My best friend is a man named Declan who works in HVAC repair and has a theory about everything. The migration patterns of birds, the psychological profile of people who don't use turn signals, the correct order in which to eat the components of a meal. He's been my friend since we were both 24 and living in the same terrible building with broken heating. He showed up at my door one January night with a space heater and a six-pack and said, "I heard your pipes froze. I have opinions about your landlord. We've been close ever since." I also have a neighbor named Morrow who is 64 and retired and bakes bread every Sunday. She started leaving a loaf outside my door about a year after I moved in when she noticed I was raising Sophia alone. She's never made a big deal of it. She just leaves the bread. Sometimes there's a note that says, "Sourdough this week," or "Tried rye, don't love it." It's one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me on a sustained basis. And then there's my family in Millhaven, whom I called every Sunday, drove to visit 6 times a year, remembered every birthday and anniversary for, and quietly, steadily, for 3 years, subsidized. The moment the pattern became impossible to ignore happened about 18 months before the cake incident. It wasn't dramatic. That's the part that always gets me. The moment clarity arrives is rarely dramatic. It's usually just a Tuesday. I was on a phone call with my mother. Sophia had just started 1st grade, and I'd mentioned that her teacher said she was reading at a 3rd grade level, that they were giving her additional materials. I was proud, quietly. Specifically proud. My mother said, Then, "Oh, before I forget, Colton's business is having a really good month. He landed a big account, a commercial property over on Route 9. That was the whole conversation about Sophia's reading level. I sat with the fact that I had been telling my mother things about my daughter for 6 years, and the response was consistently a redirect back to Colton. His business, his life, his news. Sophia was the audience. Colton was the show. I told myself it was just how she was. I filed it away and kept calling every Sunday. I was wrong to file it away, but I wasn't ready yet. Now, the cake. Sophia turned 7 in October. She had been planning her birthday for approximately 4 months, with the focused intensity that 7-year-olds bring to things they care about deeply. She wanted a chocolate cake with blue frosting, specifically blue. She described it as the color of the ocean but a little more purple, and strawberries on top. She wanted her name in silver letters. She had a vision. I went to the bakery on Clement Street and explained Sophia's vision to the woman behind the counter with complete seriousness because Sophia deserved to be taken seriously. The cake cost $64. It was beautiful. Dark chocolate layers, the exact blue-purple ocean frosting, fresh strawberries around the edge, silver lettering, Sophia, AG7. She cried when she saw it. Happy tears, the overwhelmed kind that 7-year-olds get when something is exactly right. The party was at my parents' house in Millhaven. My mother had suggested it, said she wanted to host, said it would be good to have the whole family together. I drove 2 hours with Sophia and the cake on the back seat. Colton was there with his wife Renata and their 2 children, Oliver and Bea. Renata is a woman who has made organic eating her entire personality and would like you to know this within the first 4 minutes of any conversation. We'd been there maybe 45 minutes. Sophia was playing in the backyard. I was in the kitchen with my mother, and Renata came in to get water. She saw the cake box open on the counter and stopped. She leaned down to look at it more closely, the way you'd examine something suspicious at a crime scene. Then she straightened up and said, "Is that store-bought?" I said, "It's from a bakery, custom order," she said. "It's not organic." I said, "It's a birthday cake." She said, "My kids can't eat that. The dye's alone." She picked up the box. She actually picked it up, walked to the trash can under the sink, and dropped it in. The box, the cake, the whole thing. "Store-bought garbage," she said, brushing her hands together like she'd disposed of something hazardous. "My kids only eat organic. I've told everyone this." I want to describe what that moment felt like, but I'm going to describe it accurately rather than emotionally. It felt like a switch being thrown, not anger, something quieter and more permanent than anger, something that settles instead of flares. My mother, who was standing 4 feet away, laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a genuine, delighted laugh, like Renata had said something charming. "She has standards," my mother said. "You have to respect that." I looked at my mother. I looked at the trash can. Sophia was outside, not yet aware that her ocean blue cake, the exact right shade of blue-purple, was sitting in a trash can under the kitchen sink. I reached into the trash can, picked up the box, and put it on the counter. I closed the lid. I found Sophia in the backyard and said, "Bug, we're going to go have your birthday cake somewhere else. Just us. Is that okay?" She looked at me with those 7-year-old eyes that understand more than they should, and she said, "Yeah, Dad. Okay." I said goodbye to no one. I put Sophia in the car. I drove to a park 12 minutes away. We sat at a picnic table. I opened the box, we sang Happy Birthday together, just the two of us, and she blew out the candles I'd brought in a little bag because I am a father who brings backup candles. We ate cake with plastic forks from my glove compartment emergency kit. Sophia said, "This is the best birthday I've ever had." She's 7. She's only had 7 birthdays. But still, I wrote it down when I got home that night. What I did not do was call my mother. I drove home, put Sophia to bed, sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, and opened my banking app. For 3 years, 37 months, I had been making a monthly transfer of $2,100 to an account Colton called his business operating fund, the landscaping business, the future entrepreneur. The account was not really a business operating account in any meaningful sense. It was his rent, his utilities, and whatever gap existed between his actual income and his actual lifestyle. I had started the transfers when Colton told me the business was having a hard first year. I'd sent $2,100 and said, "Pay it back when you can." He never mentioned paying it back. I stopped mentioning it too. I just kept sending it, month after month, for 37 months. That's $77,700, in case you're keeping track. I wasn't, for a long time. Then I was. I thought about the cake in the trash. I thought about my mother laughing. I thought about, I thought about the scrimmage on my 14th birthday. I thought about the space heater Declan brought, and Morrow's bread, and Greer staying late to help me with paperwork when I hadn't asked. I thought about all the people who had shown up and all the people who had not. Then I opened the recurring transfer settings and canceled the payment. 4 clicks, 37 months of habit, canceled at 11:17 on a Saturday night. I finished my tea. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. 6 days later, Colton's landlord called him about the late rent. Colton called me 40 minutes after that at 2 in the afternoon on a Friday while I was documenting an intake. I stepped out and answered. He was not calm. "What did you do?" "My landlord just called. The transfer didn't go through." "What happened?" I said, "I canceled it." Silence. Then, "What do you mean you canceled it?" "I mean, I canceled the recurring transfer. It won't be coming anymore." The volume increased significantly. "Benedict, that's our rent. That's how we pay our rent. We depend on that money." I said, "I know." He said, "Then why did you cancel it?" I said, "Colton, your wife threw Sophia's birthday cake in the trash." He said, "That's what this is about? A cake?" That question contains a fundamental misunderstanding of how damage accumulates. He thought it was about a cake. It was not about a cake. The cake was the last item in a very long inventory, and he hadn't seen the inventory. So I said, "I'll talk to you soon," and hung up. He called back 3 times. I didn't answer. Renata texted, "This is insane behavior over a birthday cake. My children have dietary restrictions." My mother left a voicemail. "Benedict, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is affecting the whole family. Colton is very upset. Please just fix the transfer." I saved the voicemail. I know why now. I stopped calling on Sundays. I stopped driving to Millhaven. I stopped being the person who remembered everyone's birthdays and kept the logistics running. I went quiet completely, suddenly, without announcement. I wanted to see how long before anyone reached out simply to check on me, not to ask for anything, just to ask how I was doing. I counted. It took 23 days. Paige called on day 23 to tell me Mom was really hurt by my silence and that Colton was having a really hard time. I asked if anyone had asked how I was doing. She paused. I mean, we're all worried about you. I said, that's not the same thing, Paige. The call ended badly. My father texted on day 29, need you to call me about the Colton situation. Not, how are you? The Colton situation. Like I was an employee who'd created a problem. On day 31, my mother called needing help with an insurance form. And there it was. The asking voice. The tone that preceded every request my whole life. Slightly softer, slightly more careful. The specific warmth that appeared when something was needed. I had been trained to respond to it like a dog to a whistle. The difference was that I finally heard the whistle. I said I'd look at it when I had time. I hung up and sat with the feeling you get when you finally identified a sound you've been hearing your whole life. It's not relief. It's something heavier and quieter. It's recognition. Here's what was happening in my life during those 31 days, because this is the part people always miss. They hear the family drama and forget to ask, what was the person actually doing? I was doing well, genuinely, specifically well. Greer had recommended me for a regional training program, a forensic documentation certification that would make me one of 12 senior technicians in the state qualified to lead intake training. Greer, who is small with very short gray hair and wears the same waterproof watch every day because she's had 3 ruined by formaldehyde, said something I wrote in my work notebook. You have been doing the work of 3 people for years and crediting it to the job. Start crediting it to yourself. It wasn't a compliment. It was an instruction. I'm still working on following it. I started seeing Dr. Leland, recommended by a colleague. He has an office on the 11th floor with a window that looks out at the water, a habit of holding his coffee mug with both hands even when it must be cold, and a small succulent on his windowsill that is thriving in a way I find personally inspiring. He asks questions and then waits in total silence while you actually answer them. In our 3rd session, I described the family dynamic, the Colton hierarchy, the Sunday calls, the money, the cake, and said, I think the hardest part is that they do love me in their way. I'm not sure it changes anything. Dr. Leland was quiet for a while. Then he said, you've been spending your entire adult life trying to earn membership in a family you were born into. You can't earn what you already had. The tragedy is that they let you spend the currency anyway. I'm still sitting with that. The idea that I had spent decades trying to buy a place at a table I had a birthright to sit at, and the table had just kept taking the payments. Declan handled the whole situation the way he handles everything, by never mentioning it and just showing up. He came over with takeout and a strong opinion about a documentary, stayed until midnight, and when he left, said, you look better than you did 2 weeks ago. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. Sophia thrived. Without the Millhaven trips and the strained dinners, she had her weekends back. We went to the Natural History Museum. We went to the farmer's market where she picked out strange vegetables with great confidence. We started a puzzle that lived on the coffee table for 3 weeks. Normal life. Our life. It felt like something expanding. The real call from my mother came 6 weeks after the cake incident. She said Colton was 3 months behind on rent. His landlord had sent a formal notice. Renata was beside herself. And, this is your fault, Benedict. You just stopped without any warning, and now your brother's family is suffering. I let her finish. Then I said, Mom, I'd like to talk to everyone together. Can we meet? She said yes, believing this meant I was coming around. We met at my parents' house the following Saturday. Colton and Renata were there. Paige came. My father sat in his chair looking like a man who would rather be anywhere else. I had prepared. I did not go into that room to express my feelings. I went in with documentation. I put a folder on the coffee table. Inside, 37 months of bank statements with the $2,100 transfers highlighted. A summary, $77,700 total, dates of first and last transfer, Colton's original message asking for a bridge, the text exchange where I'd mentioned repayment, and he'd responded with a thumbs up emoji and never mentioned it again. The birthday cake incident, October 14th, my mother's voicemail transcript printed. Paige's call on day 23 with the key quote, "Colton is having a really hard time right now." Colton looked at the folder like it was a weapon. Maybe it was. I said, in 37 months, I transferred $77,700 to this family. I don't want it back. I'm not here to collect a debt. I'm here because I want someone in this room to acknowledge what that was. It was not a business loan, and it was not charity. It was the price I believed I had to pay to matter to you, and I would like someone to tell me if I was right about that. The room was very quiet. Renata said, "This is incredibly dramatic for a cake." I looked at her and said, "You threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash. She planned that cake for 4 months. I am not interested in discussing it with you. This conversation is with my family." My mother started to say something about Renata's standards. I said, "Mom, I have the voicemail where you said to fix the transfer. Not that you missed me. Not that you wanted to see Sophia. Fix the transfer? I want you to understand what that felt like to hear." My mother's face did something complicated. Not quite guilt, not quite recognition, something in the space where people know they've done something and aren't ready to name it. My father said quietly, "You should have talked to us." I said, "Dad, I talked to you for 20 years. You came to every one of Colton's events and 2 of mine. I have a daughter you've seen 4 times in 7 years." At some point, the talking is done and the listening was supposed to start. He looked at his hands. Colton said, "I needed that money. I thought we were family." I said, "So did I. For 37 months, I thought so." He said, "What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I know my brother." I know the difference between his genuine voice and his tactical voice. That was his tactical voice. He was sorry I had stopped the payments. I said, "I know you mean that about as much as you mean your thumbs up emoji. But thank you." Paige started crying. Real crying. She said, "I didn't know about the money. I didn't know any of that." I believed her. She looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Benedict. I think I've been a bad sister." That hit harder than anything else in the room, because she meant it, and because it was the first genuinely true thing anyone had said since I sat down. I said, "I know you didn't know. That's not on you in the same way." Renata and Colton left before the conversation was finished. They said they had to get back to the kids. The landlord situation was not resolved that day. I did not offer to resolve it. Here is what the aftermath looked like. Not the movie version. The real one. Colton and Renata found a smaller apartment. It took 2 months and involved Renata's parents helping with rent. Colton texted once during those months, 2 sentences. "I heard what you said. I'm thinking about it." I wrote back, "Okay, thinking about it is more than nothing." My mother started calling more regularly. Not the instrumental calls, the actual ones. She asked about Sophia. She asked about my work. She told me, on a Tuesday in January, that she'd looked up what a forensic mortuary technician actually does, and said, "That sounds very hard and important." I almost asked her to repeat it. I just said, "It is, yeah." That's not a redemption arc. That's 1 sentence on a Tuesday after 37 years. But I'm recording it accurately. My father sent a card, a physical, handwritten card, 3 sentences. "I know I haven't been fair to you. I'm sorry about the birthday party. I'd like to see Sophia if you'll allow it." My dad, who communicated primarily through grunts and football commentary, wrote 3 sentences by hand. I showed it to Declan, who said, "Huh, good for him." I agreed. Paige and I have started talking weekly. Real conversations. She admitted she'd been so focused on being the protected baby that she'd never noticed what I was carrying. She said it plainly and without making it about herself, which is, I think, the correct way to apologize for a pattern. I've started to trust her. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. Renata has not apologized. I do not expect her to. She is consistent, at least. There is a moment I keep returning to. About 3 months after the meeting, on a Sunday morning in February, I was at the kitchen table with Sophia, working on the ocean puzzle. Big, complicated, lots of blue. Morrow had left a rosemary loaf that morning. We were eating toast, and Sophia was telling me about anglerfish, about how they live so deep in the ocean that they carry their own light with them. She said, "Dad, do you think that's lonely? Carrying your own light?" I said, "I used to think so. I think now it's just efficient." She gave me that 7-year-old sideways look. "That's a weird answer." I said, "I'm a weird dad." She said, "Yeah, but you're the right dad. I wrote that down too. My name is Benedict. I'm 37 years old and I work in a place where I am trusted with the most irreversible moments in people's lives. I've learned that the body keeps an account of everything. Every injury, every healed fracture, every old wound that closed over without proper care. You can read someone's history in what remains. The body doesn't editorialize, it just records. I think families work the same way. The evidence is always there if someone is willing to look. I looked. I made a folder. I sat in my parents' living room and read the record aloud as calmly as I could to the people who had written it. I'm not healed, whatever that means. I'm the person who is no longer spending $77,700 worth of effort trying to be seen by people who were looking slightly to the left of me their entire lives. I redirected the budget. The returns are better. Sophia's new birthday cake is already planned for October. She wants it to look like the deep ocean. Very dark blue, almost black at the bottom, and bioluminescent spots. The anglerfish phase has deepened into something serious. I've already called the bakery. I described what she wanted with complete seriousness because she deserves to be taken seriously. We're going to the park. Just us, with backup candles. That's not a consolation prize. That's the plan. That's the whole plan, and I mean that in the best possible way.